Hi everyone, my name is Alessandra. I study nutrition here at Rutgers University, and today we're going to talk about the chef knife, the cutting board, a vegetable peeler, liquid measuring cups, dry measuring cups, and measuring spoons. But before we learn how to use these tools, we need to get ready to cook. And to do that, we need to follow 3 steps. The first step is to clean any surface. So that could be your countertop, your cutting board, any type of cooktops. Next, we want to tie back any long hair. Long hair can get caught in kitchen tools, it can get burned, or it can fall into the food that you're preparing. The third step is to wash our hands. Make sure you wash your hands with warm water for about 20 seconds to make sure you get any bacteria off. After we do these 3 very important steps, then we're ready to cook. And it's also very important to know when to use each cooking tool because each tool is used for a specific type of food in a specific type of way. So not only do we want to know how to use each tool, but we also want to know for what, and we want to make sure we can use it safely so that we don't get hurt. Let's start with the most common kitchen tool, the chef's knife. So using a knife properly and using proper knife technique is very important because we want to make sure that we're only cutting our produce and not our fingers. Good cuts are important. They help us waste less food, it improves how your food looks, and it makes sure that your ingredients cook evenly. Also, cutting foods in different ways can actually change how we perceive how it tastes. When we cut foods with a sharp knife, we want to make sure that we're using a cutting board so that we don't damage the table underneath. We also want to make sure that the cutting board itself doesn't move around because that can be dangerous and you can run the risk of cutting yourself. So a board like this that has rubber stoppers on the bottom is great for it not to move. If yours doesn't have that, you can use a kitchen towel or a damp cloth to put underneath to make sure it doesn't slide around. Another important thing when using a knife is to make sure that you're using a knife that's comfortable for you. Here I'm using a chef's knife, but use whatever knife size feels comfortable for you. So what we're going to do the proper knife grip is we're going to do what's called the handshake grip. So I'm going to hold a knife and I'm going to do a handshake with the knife to be able to have a firm grip and comfortable grip on the knife. Now, if this doesn't feel exactly right to you, what you can do is what's called choking up, which is when you move your hand up closer towards the knife. If again you need more control or power, you can move even farther up and place your fingers on the side of the knife, and that will give you more control while you're cutting. A very common mistake that beginners make is putting their finger on the top of the knife. This doesn't actually give you more control or power. So again, what you want to do is holding the actual handle of the knife comfortably, or again, choking up. It's also good to use the saying, knife moves, eyes down, food moves, knife down. And basically what that means is while you're cutting, you want to make sure that your eyes are always down. And if you're moving food, put the knife down so that you can safely move your food. It's also important to wash your produce before cutting. So now we're going to wash our cucumber. We're going to come back. Now that we know our knife safety, we're going to come back and we're going to start cutting. All right, so again, we've washed our cucumber. So we're going to start off with the vegetable peeler. So the vegetable peeler, obviously it has the handle and then it has the blade. When using the vegetable peeler, we want to make sure that we're going away from us. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do an alternating pattern all the way around the cucumber. And again, I'm making sure that my hand is away from the blade and put it down when I'm done. And I'm done. And then I have my scraps in my bowl. And now we can move on to cutting. So now we're going to learn how to properly cut and hold the produce that we're cutting. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is called the claw method. So in order to do the claw method correctly, you're going to hold your hand out with your fingers all together, and then you're going to curl your fingers, making sure that your thumb is tucked behind those fingers. That is going to be the proper claw shape. Then we're going to take this claw, place it on top of our produce a little close to the edge, and that is when we can start cutting. Again, you want to pick up your knife, make sure you have a proper hold on it, and before you cut, make sure, again, you always make sure your thumb is tucked. And then that's when we can cut, either using a sawing motion, or you can place the tip of the knife down and bring it down to cut. So that is going to, again, be our claw method. Now we're going to cut the cucumber into smaller shapes. Again, we're going to use our claw method, bringing it down, or the sawing method. Now we're going to move on to the bridge method. So the bridge method is when you make a bridge shape, like so. Using a sawing motion, you're going to go all the way down. Now we have created a flat surface to continue our cuts compared to a round rolling surface, which is not as safe. So now that, again, we have our flat surface here, we can continue to do our claw method, and we're going to cut half moon shapes. So let's continue. Let's do our half moon shapes. And again, we're just going to go all the way down, making sure my thumb is tucked behind. And then you can carefully take the rest of the cucumbers off of the knife, very carefully. And again, we have our other half, so we can continue. I'm going to use my claw shape. I'm going to do proper holding. And again, you can start with sawing. If you don't feel as comfortable, start with sawing. Or again, you can put the top down and go along the way. Another important safety tip while cutting is make sure you don't pinch your food sideways. This is going to expose your fingers and you can really risk cutting your fingers. So we're going to take, again, our vegetable peeler. We were able to make this beautiful, nice pattern. So we're going to go back, not pinch. Instead, we're going to, again, use proper claw method and proper holding technique to continue cutting all the rest of our cucumber that we have here. All right, and here we have it. We have all of our cucumber cut. Now remember, you can use these same techniques to cut strawberries into slices, apples into larger cubes, or carrots into smaller cubes. Just remember that practice is what makes perfect, so don't worry if you need a little bit more practice. Even professionals have to practice knife safety skills. All right, so now that we've talked about how to cut food, let's talk a little bit more about cooking and baking. So I want you to think about your favorite homemade food and like who makes it. Let's think about in what way could you make it again so that it tastes the same. The answer to that would be to follow a recipe. So if you were to look at a recipe, you would see the name of the food and the quantity, and usually you can use a scale to measure out the quantity, but today we are going to talk about measuring cups, and right now specifically dry measuring cups. All right, so for our dry measuring cups, they usually come in different sizes. So we have our 4th cup, 1/3 cup, half a cup, and 1 cup. So we can use each of these to measure. If you're following a recipe, let's say it calls for 1/4 cup. I'm going to look for my dry measuring cup that has that same measure, 1/4 cup. And you can use this method called the dip and sweep method to measure things like flour, sugar, spices, or even solid ingredients like our produce here. To properly do this method, you're going to dip into whatever it is that you're measuring. And then using a butter knife, the flat edge, you're going to sweep off the excess on the top. And that is how you properly do the dip and sweep method. A similar method can be used when using our next tool, which is the measuring spoons. These also come in a variety of sizes and shapes. So here we have, and we're specifically going to be talking about our teaspoon and our tablespoon. So let's say my recipe calls for 1 tablespoon. I'm again going to take out my flour, and I'm going to use the dip and sweep method to measure a proper tablespoon. So again, I'm going to dip and sweep using the flat edge of the butter knife. and that is going to be the correct measure of 1 tablespoon. Now, what if your recipe calls for a heaping tablespoon? In that case, you're going to dip and you're going to leave the top rounded. All right, so that is going to be a heaping tablespoon, but if it doesn't specify, then you can assume that you can level it off, and that is your tablespoon. Now, I want to talk about something very important, the difference between a teaspoon and a tablespoon, since this is a very common mistake that is made. So, a tablespoon is bigger than a teaspoon. Actually, 3 teaspoons can fit inside 1 tablespoon. Usually, a teaspoon would be abbreviated as TSP or just lowercase t, while a tablespoon would be TBSP or capital TBSP or just a capital T. So knowing the difference is very important. All right, so let's move on to liquid measuring cups. So liquid measuring cups usually come in clear glass or plastic, and they usually have extra space at the top so nothing spills while you're moving around. There's also a spout for easy porridge. So to use the liquid measuring cup, we're usually going to use it for things like milk, oils, or other liquids. And to properly measure, I'm going to take my liquid here, which in this case is milk, and I'm going to pour the ingredients in slowly while the measuring cup is on the table. Now, in order to make sure I'm measuring properly, I have to get down to eye level to make sure it's reaching, which in this case, let's say my recipe calls for 1/4 cup, it's reaching that line of 1/4 cup. It's very important to bend down and to make sure you can see that line so that you're measuring the proper amount. So now that you know how to properly cut ingredients with a knife, a peeler, and how to measure out ingredients, you have all the skills that you need to make your own snacks and basic recipes. Happy cooking, and remember, always wash your hands, your ingredients, and your surfaces. Bye!